Okay. So I just have a few PowerPoint slides, just mostly it's just going to be me talking for better and for worse. Anyway, so Ben, can you bring up the PowerPoint, please? I tell people my computer is voice activated. I say, Ben, would you please?
Yeah.
Who's Robert Green?
It's going to be quite a few. Are you talking to me?
Yeah,
There's going to be people from outside of our area
okay.
joining from other clusters. So
I have it muted.
there's going to be multiple people you don't recognize.
Well, welcome, Robert Green. Where are you?
Three people that I've never heard of.
Okay, so there's
I'm in Mono County,
Mono County. Okay.
Oh,
Wow.
Mammoth Lakes.
Wow.
wow.
Okay.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome.
Wow.
Okay, so thank you, dear friends, for allowing me to have the oh, sorry, I have to say hi to Daryl and Dana. So people are joining, which is wonderful. So I can't now stop and welcome everybody, but just in general, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some news on the National Baha'i Council convention. Sorry, held at the Baha'i House of Worship in Wilmette, Illinois, in April. So
She was Persian.
So it's such a honor to be a delegate from, I'm the delegate from the Northern California coastal area, Robert, so you know where we are. And it's always a joy to participate in the national, for me to participate in the national convention.
We might recommend that people who aren't actually speaking at the moment can mute themselves. We're getting some noise and we're getting some feedback. So maybe Deborah and Josh, your screen. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay. So why don't we move to the next one?
The picture.
Yeah, the picture, please. So this is, they take an official photograph every year, the National Convention delegates and stuff. And can you see me, guys? Is that a good picture? Is my hair okay? Okay, all right. Up.
I don't know where you are.
It doesn't matter. I'm there. Yep, there I am. Can you see Bryn's marker?
Oh, there you go. Just to prove that she really did go.
I really did go.
On your behalf.
Standing next to Joanna Conrad. Hi, Kira, welcome. Okay, so yeah, so I'm going to take advantage of the, because we're meeting by Zoom, I'm going to have an opening prayer that is a from YouTube. It's actually 3 prayers, so we'll have an opening prayer.
Oh God, guide me, protect me, make of me a shining lamp and a brilliant star. Oh God, guide me, protect me, make of me a shining lamp and a brilliant star. Thou art the mighty and the powerful. 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 Is there any river of difficulties? Save God, save God. Is there any remover of difficulties? Save God, save God. Say praise be God, He is beating. Say, oh God, my God, let's hire mine head with the crown of justice, and my temples with the ornament of equity. Of equity, thou verily art the possessor of all gifts and bounties. Thou verily art the possessor of all gifts and bounties. Say, oh God, my God, protecting my make of me a crown of justice. In the day, guide me, protect me, make of me a crown and a brilliant of equity. Say that the mighty and the powerful, thou mighty and the powerful, say thou mighty and the powerful, thou mighty and the powerful, say, oh God, my God, as I turn my head, could we a shine of justice.
What do they see now?
Hmm?
What do they see now?
The green, whatever's in the green box.
It's the picture of the convention.
Yes.
So, yeah, so we'll stop sharing. Isn't that sweet? So sweet. So again, welcome everyone. And I will say again that this is being recorded. So if you don't want your picture to be shown, you can turn off your camera. Yeah. So I'd like to make a few comments before to preface my report. First, this convention was in person for the first time after 2.5-year break because of two-year break because of COVID-19. The last two conventions were conducted by mail only. Delegates sent in their ballots. There was no gathering, no consultation. So this gave a really special sense of joy that permeated this meeting. So the second, because of COVID, no guests were allowed at this convention, which was unusual, as several people here know. The delegates were not allowed to invite guests. The members of the regional Baha'i councils were not allowed to attend. There were just 3 representatives of the Continental Boards of Counselors, members of the National Spiritual Assembly who were not delegates. Many of them were delegates from their area, but some of them were not. Some representatives of the institution of Hukuk, some staff, and of course the delegates. So it was a relatively small group of about 170 people, where normally there would have been more than 250 people attending. Third, this national convention was held in literally the first days of the new 9-year plan. And this added an element of excitement and uncertainty, as none of us are totally clear about the future of the world and exactly how we're supposed to respond to it. So this is a pretty fabulous group on here. Do any of you have a magic crystal ball?
Sure.
Sure.
Sure. It doesn't work.
It doesn't. So we're all just kind of feeling our way along. Anyway, so that sort of I'm going to say tension almost was part of the convention. Because we're moving ahead and here we go. So in my cluster, the friends like to have a sound bite to sum up my National Convention report. So I'll give you a sound bite, and then if you want to leave, that's fine. So for this year, I would say the sound bite is the page has turned. The page has turned. This phrase is from the Rizwan letter from the Universal House of Justice for 2021. And it refers to the fact that the new 9-year plan, while we continue to work in the framework of action we have been given for expansion and consolidation, social action and public discourse, we are increasingly outward looking. The page has turned. I'll talk more about this in my report. So just, you know, the way I'm thinking, the way I thought I would organize my comments is I'm using notes, because if I don't, I go off on tangents.
And if the notes touch the computer, sometimes you get a lot of scratching noise on the other end.
Yeah.
if
So
you get
Bryn's
any
reminding
scratching-
me not to put the notes on the
Computer.
computer.
Sorry.
So anyway, so the way I would like to organize my thoughts is to first I'm going to talk about the delegates, because that's clearly the heart of the convention. And who are these people that you elect every year? That Baha'is around the United States elect the National Spiritual Assembly. So I want to talk a little bit about the delegates. Next, I'm going to give a short explanation of the mechanics of the conventions, how they work. I will move from this practical information to the heart of the convention, which actually is very spiritual. It's a deeply spiritual experience. I will share a few highlights of the convention that was held, and then the consultation, sorry. And then, of course, I'll try to explain the election of the National Spiritual Assembly. So if I stick to my notes, it should take just about half an hour for my remarks, and then there'll be lots of time for discussion and sharing and questions and whatever you would like to do. So is that okay with everybody? Okay. So I'm going to talk about the delegates, because to really have some understanding of National Convention, you need to think about who these people are. And a story from that really makes the point came from Councillor Marc Sisson. Do some of you remember Marc Sisson? Anyway, so Councillor Marc Sisson, a couple of years ago, he asked all the delegates who are active Ruhi facilitators to stand up. And from where I was sitting, it looked about like 7/8 of the delegates stood up. Almost every delegate is an active Ruhi facilitator. Then he asked the delegates who were junior youth empowerment animators to stand up. So the Ruhi tutors were still standing, and then the animators stood up. So now almost everybody was standing. And then he asked the active teachers of the course to stand up. And of course, everybody in the auditorium stood up. The point is, of course, that the delegates are people who are in the field, actively trying to move populations toward the world order of Baha'u'llah. Your national convention is not just a gathering of nice folks who gather around and sing Kumbaya. These are people who are living in this time, in this place, and really struggling to figure how to get this to work. One of the delegates has a junior youth group in Parkland, Florida, and he asks, "What do you say to these kids when their sibling is shot in school?" These are tough times, friends, and Baha'is are not immune. And this is the kind of thing that is discussed at national conventions. So a few statistics may be interesting. The way that electoral units are set up, it's by Baha'i population, and the National Assembly makes those decisions. So there are 171 delegates for all of the United States. This year, 151 voted in person and 20 voted in absentee. They mailed in their ballots, and there was 100% participation. Every one of the 171 delegates voted. There are 106 men and 65 women delegates. Of these, 64 identified as whites, 41 Persian, 40 Black, 3 Hispanic, 3 Asian, 1 American Indian, 2 Middle Eastern, and 14 identified as multi-ethnic. There's lots to say about that, but anyway, we'll move on. This year, there were 15 first-time delegates. So you have some sense of who these people are? Okay, so I'll explain just a little bit about how it works. Some people really like to know where did you sleep and where did you eat? So, very briefly. You know that all across the United States in October of every year, there's our units conventions. So our unit convention was held last year, and it was by mail, as you remember, because of COVID. And the chief teller of the unit convention sent a report to the National Spiritual Assembly, telling them who had been elected as delegate. And then it seems like nothing kind of happens for a while. But then in January, each delegate received a letter from the National Spiritual Assembly recognizing him or her as the delegate and providing the dates of the convention and the name of the convention hotel at which Baha'is could receive a discounted rate. You don't have to stay at the hotel. One year, Brenda and I stayed at a Airbnb, but there is the National Assembly does have a convention hotel with this reduced rates. So in February, more detailed information is sent to the delegates with the convention site, pre-registration instructions, a preliminary schedule, information about meals and public transportation. And upon registering this year to attend the convention, each person had to send an image of their proof of vaccination for COVID-19. So in March, the actual ballot was sent to each delegate, and these are cardboard sheets with 9 perforations, and so the 9 places to put 9 names. So you get the actual ballot in March with deepening materials on the sacredness of Baha'i elections. Then in April, the delegates received a printed copy of the Rizwan 2020 annual report and of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States. Of course, this is online, but the delegates are sent a printed copy and they study it and they come and say on page 123 in paragraph 4. Anyway, so now materials on hand. Most delegates arrived in the Chicago area on Wednesday, April 20th, as the delegate preparation session with the Continental Counselors began at 9 a.m. in the large conference room in the DoubleTree Hotel. So the deepening delegate preparation takes place in the hotel, not in the house of worship. Went on for 3 hours, and these are long days, basically beginning at 8:30 or 9 every morning and ending at 9 or 9:30 every night. They're long days. For most delegates, breakfast is provided as part of their hotel accommodation. And then for all delegates and the guests, the National Spiritual Assembly has catered lunches and dinners that are provided throughout the convention. And it's pretty good food. And you have a choice of whatever. There's a lot of food and good healthy choices. So just a few more notes about the mechanics of the event. Each of the 4 days of the convention, the gathering began with a devotional program in the house of worship. So remember I said the pre-convention deepening did not take place, but then we moved to the house of worship, and where the convention began, and it always begins with devotions. And that's upstairs, and then the delegates go downstairs to Foundation Hall where the actual convention takes place. And we sit in rows of folding chairs. Each delegate registered is given a large card with a number on it. There are 171 delegates to the National Convention, and they're given a number by the alphabetical order of their last name. So let's see, I'll see. I don't know how this is going to work on Zoom, but
Sure, yeah.
It-
She's got it on fuzz, so won't.
anyway, so you get the idea. This is the size, and my number this year was 29, and I'm always something like that from delegate 29. So during the consultation, if a delegate wishes to speak, he or she raises the number, and the secretary of the convention writes down the number in the order in which the number is raised. So these numbers in the order in which the delegates speak are displayed on a large screen in front of the hall. So it's a very systematic, organized, whatever. I'm so glad I wrote notes, because my mind, I could go on for hours just about that part of it. Anyway, but finally, during the first session, the organization of the convention is decided. It was decided that each comment would only be 3 minutes long. And the delegates who had not spoken prior had priority over delegates who had already made comments. As a result of this organization, the reality was that each delegate only gets to speak once during the convention. And that one time you get to speak is 3 minutes long. So this meant that as at any convention, the real sharing and giving and take really takes place during the breaks, when the delegates greet each other, follow up on comments that have been made, to ask about teaching strategies, working in local communities, and so forth. These discussions are very rich. And I'm going to throw in one thing, is that for 4 days, I saw or heard no news from the world outside of the Baha'i world. It's possible things went on. I had no idea. Can you imagine what a joyful time it is to only hear the wonderful news of the Baha'i world for 4 days? And it was great. So let's see. So we elect the chairperson and secretary and all that stuff. So anybody have any questions about just the practicality? Okay, so, all right. So we talked about the walking the spiritual path with practical feet. We've gone through the practical stuff. So let's finally move to the spiritual path. Each national convention in the United States starts with a preparation session with members of the Continental Counselors, which I have come to appreciate more and more. The 3 counselors who attended the US National Convention this year were Louis Bodie, William Silva, and Farah Guchani Rosenberg. And they led us through a deepening on the sacredness of Baha'i elections. Because ultimately, that is the reason for the convention, to elect the 9 members of the National Spiritual Assembly for the coming year. Among the deepening materials given to us was a letter from the Universal House of Justice sent to the Baha'is of the world in March 25th, 2007, which starts with these thoughts. One of the signs of the breakdown of society in all parts of the world is the erosion of trust and collaboration between the individual and the institutions of governance. In many nations, the electoral process become discredited because of endemic corruption. Contributing to the widening distrust of so vital a process are the influence on the outcome from vested interest, having access to lavish funds, the restrictions on freedom of choice inherent in the party system, and the disillusion in public perception of the candidates by the biases expressed in the media. Apathy, alienation, and disillusionment are a consequence too. It is a growing sense of despair of the unlikelihood that the most capable citizens will emerge to deal with the manifold problems of a defective social order. This is from our House of Justice. Evident everywhere is a yearning for institutions that will dispense justice, dispel oppression, and foster an enduring unity between the disparate elements of society. It continues, the world order of Baha'u'llah is the divinely ordained system for which nations and peoples so desperately search. Hailed by the Bab and the Persian Bayan, its foundational features prescribed by Baha'u'llah himself, this order is without precedent in human history for its standard of justice and its commitment to the practical realization of the oneness of mankind, as well as for its capacity to promote change and the advancement of world civilization. It provides the means by which the divine will illumines the path of human progress and guides the eventual establishment of the kingdom of God on earth. So notice the goal is the establishment of the kingdom of God on earth. We'll get back to that, but for now, I want to share a comment made by one of the delegates from Georgia, the state of Georgia in the United States. He reminded us that in the United States, we're in an election cycle. Seems like we're always in an election cycle. Anyway, we're in an election cycle. And he said that historically, his family had been lynched for trying to vote in Georgia. And that current politics were raising the question again of who has the right to vote. Friends, he said, in Baha'i elections, we all have the right to vote, everywhere, always. That is one of the glories of our faith. Please don't take it for granted. Please don't take it for granted. We have local elections. We have a unit convention coming up on October 1st. You'll hear about that soon. Please don't take the privilege of voting for granted. Okay. So the deepening on the counselors took place on Thursday morning, April 21. There was a lunch break and then a holy day program for the first day of Rizwan in the temple, in the house of worship. Prayers were read, the choir sang. It was heavenly, just beautiful. When the convention formally opened on Thursday afternoon, there's a period of organizational activity very much like the process we go through at unit convention. I'm assuming that everybody joining us that's a member of the Baha'i faith, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, please ask your friends. What is she talking about? Unit convention. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead assuming that you know what a unit convention is. So you know how we elect a chairperson and a secretary at every unit convention? Well, the same thing happens at the National Convention. Any delegate is eligible to serve as a convention officer. So deepened and organized, we finally move on to the consultative part of the convention, which always begins with a reading of the Rizwan letter of the Universal House of Justice. We each had been given a printed copy of the Rizwan message, and also it was read out loud by 2 of the delegates on Thursday afternoon. Billy Silva, now a member of the Continental Board of Counselors, commented that this was the latest in a succession of messages from the House of Justice that all have helped us to understand how the major and minor plans of God work together, how the often destructive forces acting on the world at large create conditions for humanity to accept the revelation of Baha'u'llah, and how Baha'is can take constructive next steps in offering that remedy to our fellow humans. There's lots to say about this. The consultation went on for hours, but I'm going to boil it down to one takeaway. And that's this: what we as Baha'is do is not separate from the rest of the world. It is part of the world. There are not separate societies, but rather the building of a new, more unified one. I'll read it again. This is consultation on the Rizwan message, that we as Baha'is are not separate from the rest of the world. What we do is part of it. We are not separate societies, but rather the building of a new, more unified society. The page is turned, right? So that went on Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, Friday morning, there were 2 reports. First was the annual report of the National Spiritual Assembly, presented by Ken Bowers. If you wish, you can listen to his talk on the National Assembly's website, www.baha'i.us. Ken Bowers is a wonderful speaker. And again, I'm going to take his amazing comments to one takeaway. Ken said before, and he was talking about, last year in the old 5-year plan, before we used to say, become a Baha'i and help us change the world. And now we say, please come help us change the world. And yes, in time, if you want to be Baha'i, you are welcome if you want to. There is no othering. Everyone is welcome. It is a remarkable shift in consciousness. So I'll say that last part again. This is Ken Bowers' quote: there is no othering. Everyone is welcome. And this is a remarkable change in consciousness. So the second report of the morning was the annual Treasurer's Report of the National Spiritual Assembly, presented by Joanna Conrad. Her talk is also available on the US Bahá'í website. And again, I'll give you one highlight. Actually, Joanne was quite excited when she talked about a new fund initiative, an Institute Properties Reserve Fund. This is new. This is to purchase properties to support the growing need in every region to train people to conduct community building activities in many neighborhoods. Do you remember there was news that such a property was bought in North Carolina's Triangle Cluster? And she reported that it has sparked exponential growth in teaching and core activity engagement in just its first year. Joanna said this reserve was created because the needs at this time are outpacing the fundraising capacity of the regional councils, and the growth cannot stop. This is quoting her, as these properties are used by the community at the grassroots level, it is not far-fetched to think that they will become beacons of hope, transformation, and empowerment for all of humanity. That was Friday morning. Friday afternoon. I'm going to take a sip. Friday afternoon, and evening, we're focused on two topics of consultation. The first session was focused on racial justice. It began with a reading of the message from the Universal House of Justice dated July 22, 2020, to the Baha'is of the United States, which begins, "Dear Baha'i friends, a moment of historic portent has arrived for your nation." Do you remember that letter? If you haven't read it for a while, it's worth reading again and again. It's an amazing letter from the Universal House of Justice. So again, the consultation went on for a long time, but I'm going to make just 3 comments about that consultation. First, in our discourse, sorry, there's a lot of noise.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Okay. First, in our discourse, we have to distinguish very clearly whether we're talking about institutional racism or random acts of meanness. They are related but not equal, and they need to be addressed differently. What we do one-on-one is important, and we have to address institutional racism as a society. They're separate but equally important discussions. Okay, so that's number one. Second, year after year, African-American delegates have said that the best way to address racism within the Baha'i community is to study the Ruhi Institute curriculum together. When the friends gather to reflect on the life of the spirit, for example, we are sharing our deepest reality and our eternal connection. This melts all division. And I've heard this, it's stated year after year, that if the friends deepen together, read the writings together, then you just become souls beloved of God and working together for the world order of Baha'u'llah. So third, this was the first convention during which I heard African-American delegates sharing positive experiences when they invited their white neighbors to join them in community building activities. One of the friends said that he invited neighbors to join him in devotional gatherings, and they came, lots of them. He said, "I recognize how suspicious of racism I am. But when I set aside my prejudices and invited my neighbors, they came." So the setting aside of prejudice is something we all have to work on. We all have to work on it. Blacks, whites, Asians, we all have to work on it. Okay, so that was the consultation on racial justice. Again, so much more to say. Then the second topic of consultation was teaching. And the big news was us, the wave of conferences that were taking place around the world while the convention was going on. People would stop and say, wait, I just heard from my cluster and this happened and whatever. It was thrilling, just thrilling. I wish I had written down the name of the community whose delegate said she lives in a town with only 7 active Baha'is. But they do have a study circle with friends of the faith attending. And during one of these sessions, the Baha'is were talking about the call to hold conferences and feeling sad that their community did not have the resources to organize such an event. The friends of the faith said that having a community conference was a great idea and they would help. And the friends of the faith, put on a conference attended by 75 people. So there's so much learning going on, friends. First, that we do have the capacity to put on a local conference. And second, that there's a community of interest that wants to help. The page has turned. The page has turned, and we really have to believe, work. I have, speaking for myself, I have to work at believing that people want to help. And so when I say Baha'is should the House of Justice is asking for this, that it doesn't have to be just those people on the screen. There are people in the society and our community who want to help. Yeah. So it was Thursday and Friday, and now we turn to Saturday morning in the election of the National Spiritual Assembly. So I'm almost done. There'll be lots of time to talk about this. Because it's provocative, it's very stimulating. Okay, so the election. So how to describe the election itself? It's so amazing. It's so different from elections we see in the old world order. In the first place, it's silent. There's a power in silence. I've experienced silence outdoors in the wilderness, but to experience an auditorium filled with several hundred people is transcendent. As you know, there's no nominations, any man or woman and Baha'i in the United States is eligible to be elected. So that's also different. The day of the election begins with prayers in the house of worship. And then the delegates walk in silence to downstairs to the foundation hall, where the voting instructions are read and more prayers are read. And then there's silence. During the election for half an hour, perhaps 45 minutes, Baha'is from all over the United States sit and open their hearts for divine inspiration to guide them in their selection of the 9 people to serve on our national governing body. Of course, the delegates had all been elected in October the year before. So each of us had 6 months to think and pray about the upcoming election of the National Assembly. Perhaps some of them had begun making a list of people they thought they might vote for, starting with devoted Baha'is from their own area. I think Kira Cash would be a fabulous member of the National Spiritual Assembly. So I'll vote for her because I know her, I trust her. And Baha'is all over the United States do the same thing. They know local people. So we start with people that we know and then add names of the subjects of Baha'i news stories that impress us, maybe outstanding speakers at Baha'i conferences, or not, but perhaps each delegate, probably each delegate has his or her own process. But anyway, so it comes a time when you have to pick 9 names. In any case, each delegate is aware that he or she will soon discharge a divine responsibility. So the air is charged with meaning and silent. The election takes place on Saturday morning. The tellers are all delegates who are chosen ahead of time by the staff of the National Baha'i Center. The delegates vote one by one in alphabetical order of their last name. When their name is called by the Secretary of the Convention, they put their ballot into a clear plastic box and return to the seat. When the balloting is completed, the tellers are taken to a different building where they count the votes. I was actually a teller twice, so I can tell you a lot about that process if you're interested. While the votes are being counted, the delegates take a break, continue with consultation. The convention photograph is taken, and then after lunch, the election results are read out loud by the chief teller. So now we're going to switch back to the PowerPoint presentation so you can see.
You want to share?
Yes, please. We're going to share screen. Yep. So that's a picture of me putting my ballot in the ballot box. So it's clear plastic, so it can't be any hanky-panky. And then, and this is your National Spiritual Assembly for the Baha'is of the United States for this year. So from left, David Young, Anaba Khan Ferguth, who is a new member of the National Assembly, Muin Afnani, Ken Bowers, Joanna Conrad, Robert Henderson, Robbie Musa, Farah Aglasi, and Kevin Trotter. So that's your National Spiritual Assembly for this year. That's it.
Okay. Stop there.
So, so as you can imagine, I could go on for talking for hours, but I'm going to stop because there's a lot to think about and talk about. And if you have questions or ideas, this is, we have people from different areas of our unit attending.
Remember to unmute yourself and.
Yeah, remember to unmute yourself. So any thoughts? Questions?
Thank you, Sherna. Thank you for this. This is such a great idea to actually, thank you, Dominic. This is Dominic. Can you say hi?
Hi, Dominic.
Can you say
Welcome.
hi? Hi.
Hi, Dominic.
He couldn't wait to say hi to all of you.
Hi, Dominic.
Glad you could come, Dominic.
Dominic.
Yay. So I just want to say thank you, you guys, for having this so that we can attend.
Thank you for joining us, Kara. And Dominic, we're always happy to see you. So Ruthann has her hand up.
Well, first of all, it looks like that there's a boy here that wants to say hi as well. Karen, does your son want to say hello, or does he just want to, you know, look at the screen like my granddaughter does?
So,
He can say hi.
That was Dominic who said hello.
Hi, what's your name?
Dominic.
Hi, Dominic.
Wait a second. I'm confused. I thought there was another little boy that was Dominic. I'm so confused. All right. I just had a question. I wanted to see, I mean, from what I understood, I had to come in late. I was at that thing that Masood Olafani was doing tonight, and it just went on, and it was just spellbinding. But I just wanted to, I mean, did you feel like that there was a whole different spirit? I think I might have missed this part this time, Sherna. Was it like a whole different spirit that you were feeling, or was it just a building on everything that you knew from before?
Thank you, Ruthann. That's an interesting question. The way I'm going to describe my experience, I'm going to borrow from a Christian imagery of the three wise men following the star. Probably most of you are familiar with that image, Christmas cards and so forth. So there's a certain amount of this is a tough time in human history. The House of Justice said the next 10 years is the hardest time ever in human history. So if you're feeling a little confused and distressed, guess what, right? And the House of Justice is saying, keep going, keep doing your thing. So during this convention, we talked about mental illness in the Baha'i, well, the world, but in the Baha'i world, we talked about extreme right-wing people who are afraid of the replacement of the white people being replaced by people of color, and the fear that engenders in some people, and so forth and so on. I mean, the discussion's really real stuff. And not that anybody had any great solutions, but that we have to work with everybody. We can't just, work with the people who agree with us about everything. So, so the image was that we have Baha'u'llah, we have the guidance of the House of Justice, and we just have to keep looking up at the guidance and just keep walking one step at a time. The three wise men didn't know where Jesus was, where the manger was, the implications. They were just followed the star. And I had a feeling that was kind of at the end of the convention, that was my feeling, that we're just supposed to keep reading the guidance. If you ever get confused or distressed someday, just stop and read any letter in the last 5 years from the Universal House of Justice. They're amazing, they're helpful, and we just keep following Baha'u'llah. Because anyway, so does that answer your question pretty much?
Yes, and the other question I had was, what was that letter that you said that maybe we should read again if we, hadn't read it recently? What year was that sent?
2020. It was July 22nd, 2020.
Oh,
And
that's the one that has so much about racism. Yeah.
Yes, it's about racism. It's from the Universal House of Justice about racism.
And they told us in that letter, if I'm not mistaken, about that not to give up, not to get discouraged, because that they said it would take a long time to overcome it, and that even though things looked like they were progressing, that sadly the history of our country meant that every time progress was being made, that there would be some setback, some new process that would make things hard again. It was a beautiful letter. It was kind of sad, but
It is a beautiful letter.
very, very impressive and very worthwhile reading.
I recommend rereading it if you haven't read it for a while. And basically, if we're talking about the oneness of humanity, and you have a history of a country that was based on disunity and injustice. That said, I mean, what country hasn't? I mean, it's not like there's any country in the world that is pure, whose history is pure. But anyway, so again, I'll just say that each of us has to work individually, and each of us has to work as institutions, the local assembly. Chris Bauman.
Sorry, I'm a little sick, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Anyway, I was wondering if they record any of the talks. I know they recorded Ken Bauer's talk because he's the secretary. Did they also record and post the counselors who spoke? Because when we were just guests to the convention, that part of it was really amazing, was to hear what the counselors had to say to the delegation and to the new assembly and everything. Do they post that? I haven't looked.
Yeah, so if you go to the US National website, www.Baha'i.us.
US, yeah.
Yeah, there is, you can go to a section on the National Convention. You have to, you have to sign in to this part, but you can go, and there are, yes, there are many talks by counselors, and some outstanding talks by delegates about, kind of key things made by different delegates. So yes, there's lots of material that's posted for everybody. That's obviously not everybody, because not everything, because it's a 4-day convention, right? But yes, there are talks by the national counselors.
Yeah, you go to, I'm actually on the website as I'm looking at it. So you log in yourself, and then you click on the 3 bars on the top left-hand corner, open up the menu, and then under the word resources, you'll find National Convention 2022. And,
do you have to be a Baha'i to sign up, or because now they're kind of opening everything up, but you do have to be a Baha'i to actually get access to some of those things? Is that right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think you still have to, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of material there.
Yeah.
Good report. Good report.
I'll stop share.
So any other questions or discussions or thoughts?
And Ruth Ann and Chris, you can put your hands down now.
Thank you, Brand.
One of the things you mentioned is that like the page has turned. And I wanted to hear more on your thoughts about that, because when I heard it, I kind of put it together with one of like Paul Lample's talks that mentioned that in the past, regarding dealing with racism, for example, that we're told as the Baha'i communities that we're too small to have impact. But in the past, 25 years, we have learned many ways, and also the communities become larger and stronger. And we now have the tools and the methods to actually have an impact. And so now, like those collection of letters we received on racism, for example, it's repeatedly saying, use the tools that are given. Like we still, many of us have this mindset of, if we were to confront racism or, some issues, individually or institutionally, like you have to be in a combative mode, or you have to kind of, protest. So no, there's a entirely different way of changing that. And we understood the principles of what needs to be done, like, first understand who we are, and then learn how to live our life accordingly and help others, live the life and so on. But now we have actually created the apparatus. And so what the House of Justice saying in this turning the page and the turning of the epoch, is to basically say, okay, you were too small. Now you're not. You could only work on yourself before. Now we can work to change the world, so that's how I understood it. But I wanted to hear if there's additional thoughts.
Well, you're absolutely right. I think even up till 2018, still the House of Justice was saying we were too small. But by this letter 2020, they are saying, no, it is the Baha'is who have to change the world. So we have the three lines of action: expansion, consolidation using the Ruhi Institute curriculum. And that is hugely important for individuals and raising children who are loving and open-minded and so forth and so on. Absolutely essential that we raise children who are part of the new ways of men, right? So that's number one. But also we have social action of working on material, the material part of people's lives. And in the United States, it's harder to set up a whole new thing because in the United States, we have a lot of material goods, but we can certainly volunteer for organizations that are working on the social, physical justice issues of housing and food and so forth and so on. So that's social action. A huge thing that Baha'is have is public discourse. And that's the third line of action that we are being asked to participate in. And there's a wonderful, this is Sherna. I think it was 2016, there was a wonderful letter from the House of Justice describing the way Abdu'l-Baha participated in public discussion. And he didn't yell, he didn't scream, he didn't accuse anything, but he just said, have you considered this other way of looking at it? So we are being encouraged to show up in public spaces and just say, has it occurred to you that what you just suggested at the school board meeting might be considered racist? Just saying. And we don't have to accuse, we don't have to yell, we don't have to scream, but we just have to show up over and over any place that we can get to, public discourse. So now I'm using racial justice as the example, but I am very involved in our local interfaith council. And the executive director of our interfaith council often starts meetings by what he calls check-in. Like, how are you doing? What are you thinking? How you're feeling? And I'm here to tell you that the ministers, priests, rabbis, mullahs don't have a clue what to do, what to say, how to help people. Without Baha'u'llah, there is like no answer to any of this. So what I say in these meetings is, if you go back to the teachings of your own religion, if you look at the teachings of Jesus, not the 2,000 years of commentary, look at Jesus, look at Muhammad, look at Buddha, you'll find the answers. And they look at me like, wow, only Baha'is have the answers, only Baha'is. And we can just offer them, just with love. Have you thought about this? Have you considered that? And that is a huge shift in human consciousness in their society. Anyway, so you're absolutely right, Bryn, that even up till 2018, the House of Justice was saying worldwide, we're just too small to make a difference. But the page has turned. And now it's partly because everything else is falling apart. We are like this little candle of light in the darkness, and our little candle is all there is. So we have to share it. And we do have the tools. It's the 3 lines of action. Rebecca? You're on mute, I guess.
Thank you, Sherna. Thank you so much for bringing all of this to us tonight. I find this whole discussion really interesting. I suppose I saw it slightly differently, or took it in slightly differently, in that I don't know that the House ever said that. I don't recall them saying we have no influence. If anything, we're like salt, and it doesn't take very much to change a flavor in a pot. And what we are now is we must jump in the pot, because it doesn't take too many of us to change the flavor, to change the feeling. Now, I know salt may not be the best one, because too much of it is over the moon, but that really is the message now, is to shake it up and get into the pot. And I'm wondering, Sherna, in the delegates' deliberations, was it just a sharing of what's going on within their communities? Was there a theme that sort of overrode the mix of what people were concerned with, interested in, excited about? Was it the theme strictly the 9-year plan? And was there a thread that ran through?
Yeah, so the thread is the election, the Rizwan letter. And there were each session had a theme. And let's see, so the first session was the actual reading of the letter, talking about the letter. Then the themes were racism, teaching, contributing. I didn't even go into Saturday. There's 2 more days, right? Saturday, but contributing to social transformation, education endeavors in the Training Institute, and enhancing institutional capacity. So each session had a theme. Kind of, if they're to the overriding message would be given by the counselors. As Chris Bauman said, there are these wonderful, wonderful high-level talks by the counselors, and the discussion by the delegates tended to be more, this is how that's playing out in my neighborhood, right?
So this is sort of a detailed question. So in this consultation, is it a sharing of information in order to take back to the friends around the nation of what's happening around the nation? Is it an opportunity, maybe it's all of these, an opportunity to see who's doing what, so that when you go to vote for delegates, there's a sort of a, you know who that person is, or you know who that person is, or, I mean, what the consultations, is it things that the National Assembly is then going to consult on?
So in a way, all of the above. So the delegates are asked to take the news back to the friends. So that's what I'm doing now.
Right.
That's number one. That's one thing. Also, there's actually consultation. Like, we've tried this in our community and this worked and this didn't work. And then I said earlier, you only have 3 minutes. So it's
Right.
really during the lunch break and the other breaks, so people come and say, so what about this and what about that? You know, and then also the delegates can make recommendations to the National Spiritual Assembly. And if they do, then there's this whole discussion and voting and business. And so that delegates can make a recommendation to the National Spiritual Assembly that the whole nation should do this,
Okay.
that, or whatever. So I'm going to say one more thing about the consultation, though, because I was stunned the first time I saw it. The basic agenda is sent to the delegates ahead of time. So it's not like and who's surprised that we're going to talk about teaching, right? Like, oh, Jane, what a surprise, right? So anyway, so what is so interesting at the national level, and people who have been there more than once know they're only going to have 3 minutes. That almost every delegate arrives prepared. They think ahead of time what they want to share. They have written statements, and they always begin with Baha'u'llah said. There's almost never, I think, I feel, it's always Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah is the center of the discussion. And that makes such a different feeling to begin with. So, you know, a quote from Baha'u'llah, and we tried, and in our community, we tried it this way, and it's always we did, and there's almost the word I, me, my almost never comes up. It's a really, really different level of consultation. And a lot of things we don't know. I mean, nobody knows that precious point of unity, where to reach that precious point of unity with people who are afraid of whites being replaced by people of color. Nobody had a magic, oh, gee, that's easy, right? People who are terrified at the idea of a world government. People, you know, anyway, so, but those are the kinds of things we discuss, you know, it's like, so how do you do that? It's a very real consultation with these high, wonderful talks by the counselors. And then, okay, so that's nice. So what do you do about it? So there are other questions. I don't know what time it is, but I've never conducted a meeting that people were brokenhearted if they end it early. It's stimulating. There's a lot to talk about, to think about. Rebecca, do you have another question? You're on mute.
Not a question, and I'll wait for Daryl and others to go, but I'd love to make an announcement before we close. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Daryl?
We can't hear you, Daryl, if you're
Daryl, if you're talking, you're on mute. We see your hand up, but
There, sorry about that. Thank you for doing this gathering tonight. It's been wonderful. I'm not sure whether or not this might be a little too granular, but I thought I'd ask anyway. The fascinating concept of the art of sociability has come up in one of the books that we were studying. And I was just wondering if there might have been anything at the conference that leaned in that direction, or there was some discussion about that. And if not, I understand that might just be a little too granular.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not understanding the question. Sociability?
The art of sociability was a phrase that Abdu'l-Baha had mentioned that was in, I think it was in book 13. And I just thought that that was a fascinating concept that I wasn't familiar being talked about in the Baha'i faith previously. And so I didn't know whether or not that might have been something that came up during the conference.
I certainly don't
Okay.
remember hearing that phrase.
Yeah. And the other thought, just kind of relating to this idea that, of course, Baha'is don't need to be combative and so forth, but it's just this thought came to mind recently about, we know in progressive revelation that a revelation is geared to the capacity of people at that time. And that's fascinating to think today that despite how out of whack everything is, that in order for a message like this to come at this time for the capacity of people where they are today, that means that hardwired into people's soul must be the capacity to recognize the oneness of humankind, must be the capacity to recognize the equality of men and women, must be the capacity to reach a new level of unity that none of us have ever really known before in terms of how collectively that can work out. And so I just have been kind of thinking about that recently, and just, you know, this idea of also, Abdu'l-Baha said to always kind of envision the final destination before you begin, you know, where you're headed before you engage in a process. And so this idea of having the best example of what it is we're after can be very helpful. And so tonight I'm hearing for the first time, we're building the kingdom of God. Now, of course, that would have been intuitively kind of there before, but to just outright say it and have that on our radar screen as part of what it is that we can meditate on and reflect on, and know that we're engaged in this process to potentially, not potentially, but eventually take us all in that direction. It's just fascinating to me. And so I wanted to share some of those thoughts.
Thank you. I think among this sociability business, going back to that, I would say Baha'i consultation, where everyone is encouraged to speak, is huge.
It is.
It's a bit of a story, but I have taught 2 interfaith groups of ministers and priests and rabbis courses in Baha'i consultation. And it is fascinating because I've been a Baha'i long enough that I kind of take for granted that everyone's allowed to speak. And their first reaction is, what? You let people who have not gone to theological school for 5 years to even begin the consultation? And I, yeah. What? Children are allowed to speak? Think some of our most basic processes are revolutionary, friends, absolutely revolutionary. And when we're in our Baha'i community, we forget how revolutionary we are. Sorry, now I'm giving myself permission to go into some stories.
Chris has got his hand up too.
Okay, sorry, Chris. I'll just say one story, and then I see Chris Raglan. So this story has to do with the Rihi Institute training material. So Brenda and I had the privilege of going to Colombia to see the new house of worship in Colombia. And as part of that experience, we had the plane stopped over in El Salvador, and we went to the grave of a Christian bishop who had been assassinated by his government because he was teaching Indians how to read. This was the same time that the Baha'is in Colombia were developing the Ruhi Institute material, going into the mountains, telling people, you have the right to speak, you have the right to study, you have the right to learn. I had never, and I probably still can't understand how they were taking their life in their hands. And in a lot of places in the world, it is still dangerous to say, you have the right to you have the right to vote. You have the right to speak. What we're doing is radical. Worldwide, extremely radical. In some parts of the United States, with some people in the United States, it's extremely radical now. So, and we're trying to create a new race of people who just grow up knowing, yes, of course I have the right to speak. Of course I have the right to vote. Of course I have the right. Anyway, so we're involved in a really fascinating time and process. And I'm going to go to Chris Ragland before I tell more stories. Chris Ragland.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the sociability question. And my understanding is that is the Baha'is individually and community-wise having the capacity and the drive to engage in social interaction, social engagement, being part of the social conversation. Because we know, as Sherna shared, like consultation, right? Being a principle in the faith, being a teaching in the faith, this is the answer to fruitful discussion politically, community-wide, you know. So my understanding is the art of being able to engage with larger community and political groups and everyone else on engaging socially as far as sharing the teachings and the principles of the faith. That's my understanding of it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you're right. There was a wonderful section, I think it's the December 30th, 2021 letter, but maybe the Rizwan letter. Anyway, that where the House of Justice said, we are learning. And of course, learning means we'll make mistakes. And that's okay. Just try. That's what part of the cluster reflection meeting is, you know, try things and then see how it works and learn from it. We can never fail. We can only have opportunities to learn to do it better the next time. But the time is over for preparation. We have to, as Chris Ragland said, now is the time to go out into society and share our learning. And we do the best we can, and also know that we have the concourse on high waiting there to assist us. So it's never just us. If we say our prayers and ask for the concourse and try to be that hollow reed, we probably will do better if it's me and my ego and my limited understanding of the Baha'i writings. Anyway, I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to take Ruhi Book 13 yet. It is a mind changer. Talk about turning the page. The first 7 books of the Ruhi curriculum was kind of training us to do this and that, to be children's class teachers, junior youth animators, whatever, learning how to do things. The next group from 8 to 12 were kind of deepening materials on the the covenant and so forth and so on, kind of deepenings. 13 and 14 take us to a whole new way of being Baha'i, and how they all work together and stuff. So and then in the one of these letters in the last couple months, the House of Justice said that's it. There will be no more, no new Ruhi, whatever. There might be branches off of what we've already done and know, but there's from right now, the House of Justice is not anticipating any new Ruhi curriculum, that we have what we need to build the new world order. So Daryl, I'm going to ask you to build the New World Order after you make your comment. You're on mute.
I thoroughly enjoyed book 13, 1 and 2, and it really helped me to connect dots in terms of, well, how's the tire hit the road here, you know, in terms of actions that we can take. And I would take them again and probably should take them again. But I on art of sociability, I was just thinking a moment ago, I'm not sure if that was right. I went online and I typed in science of sociability, and that's actually what the phrase of Abdu'l-Baha is. So that's even more interesting to me, the science of sociability. So anyway, I wanted to make a little correction.
Look it up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So with your permission, I'm going to make a comment about the what is it that we're trying to do and the specificity, is that the word, right? Of what is it we're trying to do, because I've never seen it outlined as clearly and specifically as in the December 30th, 2021 letter from the Universal Justice of the Continental Consulars, which is the basis of so much of what we're trying to understand. And in paragraph 4, actually, in other iterations of this convention report, I read it, but paragraph 4 says this is what Baha'is are trying to do in the world. It's 9 sentences, which I can't share. I didn't prepare like to share a screen, but can I read the 9 sentences from the House of Justice? Because I was stunned that, like, so what does, the question is, you know, like, what are we trying to do? What is the vision? What's it going to look like? And I've never seen it as succinct as this. So you can look it up. It's paragraph 4 of the letter from the House of Justice, but the House of Justice said, the Baha'is are committed to the prosperity of all, recognizing that the welfare of individuals rests in the welfare of society at large. So this is, we're committed to the prosperity of all. In the Baha'i world order, there will be no, the extremes of wealth and poverty will be eliminated. Baha'is are loyal citizens who eschew partisanship and contest for worldly power. Instead, they are focused on transcending differences, harmonizing perspectives, and promoting the use of consultation for making decisions. Again, I can't tell you, working with interfaith leaders, how revolutionary consultation is in the religious context. Baha'is emphasize qualities and attitudes such as trustworthiness, cooperation, and forbearance that are the building blocks of the stable social order. Can you imagine trustworthiness? Can you imagine if any time you turned on the television news or whatever, however you get your news, and you knew that whoever was speaking was telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? What a difference that would make, right? And it's that, I mean, and that's just one cooperation, forbearance. Okay. Baha'is champion rationality and science as essential for human progress. Baha'is tolerate tolerance and understanding, and with the inherent oneness of humanity uppermost in their minds, they view everyone as a potential partner in collaboration with, and they strive to foster fellow feeling amongst groups who may traditionally have been hostile to one another.
They advocate tolerance.
Oh, what did I say?
You said they tolerate tolerance.
They advocate tolerance. Sorry, and understanding. So this is a, you know, in some ways we know all of this, in some ways, like so what are we trying to do? We're trying to build a kingdom of God on earth, and what would it look like? So it's a society where people advocate tolerance and understanding. Baha'is are conscious of how the forces of materialism are at work around them, and their eyes are wide open to the many injustices that persist in the world. Yet they're equally clear-sighted about the creative power of unity and humanity's capacity for altruism. This is what you're saying, Daryl, that it is in our soul to be, we are created by God to want unity. Baha'is see the power that true religion possesses to transform hearts and overcome distress. And so confidence in what the future holds, they labor to cultivate the conditions in which progress can occur. They share their beliefs liberally with others, remaining respectful of the freedom of conscience of every soul. And they never impose their own standards on anyone. And while Baha'is would not pretend to discover all the answers, they are clear about what they have learned and what they still need to learn. I found this just a stunning paragraph of what we do, what we don't do, and going into the future. So we keep learning, we keep getting better. The society keeps moving towards the oneness, which is the will of God, that there will be a kingdom of God on earth. It's the will of God. No one can stop it. And you remember Abdu'l Baha said that in the future, in this future world order, if one child in the world is unhappy, all the world will stop to make sure that one child is taken care of. So this is not, so now we have mega problems. But what is this? Anyway, there's another quote about the moving towards God is a continual process, and what seems bad today will be unimaginable in the future, that ever even was possible. They just won't even be able to imagine the world that we're living in. But the standards will be so much higher that we will just, the growth just goes on and on as you move towards God. So this is building the kingdom of God on earth is a long-term process. I'm going to tell another little story. Sorry, we're almost out of time. So this is a story. Once upon a time, when I was growing up, my family were Christian. I went to Christian churches, and we were Episcopalian. And I just want to tell you, in case you don't know, that God loves the Episcopalians best. No, just saying. And I had a friend who was a Lutheran, which is a different Protestant group. And I was terrified at going to the Lutheran church because I didn't know when to stand up and when to sit down. And, I didn't know. And I thought that's what religion was the ritual, right? So, so then when Bryn and I were at the Baha'i World Center, we used to take the friends on tours. And there was one particularly to Jerusalem where we'd go to synagogues and mosques and churches. And the Baha'i kids would go into all these houses of worship, and they would just look around and say, "Oh, wow, this is my house of worship. What do I do here?" Just totally open to God. This is a house of worship. There was no fear. There was no judgment. There was no just, "Oh, what do you do here?" Right? Well, the difference between the Christianity religion that says there's one way to do this as a ritual, and the Baha'i way, which is there's one God and one people. Just seeing the difference in children is just wonderful, just wonderful. And seeing how we are building a new society as the old society collapses. I was a little bit nervous in 2016 when the House of Justice said, "You have everything you need to build a new world order." I was like, but we do, and the old world order is collapsing all around us, as you know. So we have the tools. Anyway, so it's stimulating stuff. we have to work together. We have to know that the star is Baha'u'llah, just like the wise men, just keep walking towards the star, just one step in front of the other, building the New World Order, and knowing so many people want to join us. People really want to join us. So again, when we're thinking about Baha'i activities, or thinking about the processes to do this, know that it's not just the immediate people in our community.
Yes, Kira to finish with the prayer when time comes.
It's so, yeah. So I think it's probably a time to end. Rebecca wanted to make an announcement, and then Kira, would you sing a prayer for us to end? Yeah.
Thank you, Kira. I know there are some people here who have attended, but I'd like to announce that there is going to be another cohort starting of Copper to Gold. Copper to Gold is a group that is working on racial healing. It is predominantly working on our behaviors and how it shows up and how we show up in society. So I'm going to put the link in the chat if you're even vaguely interested in exploring what that might look like for you, working on our own inherent sense of superiority, our unconscious behaviors. This is a really wonderful, safe space, Baha'i-centered, Baha'i-inspired group that works on that. And it's a 15-week course. So there's the information in the chat. If you're interested, you can get some more information. Thank you, Sherna.
Thank you, Rebecca. Chris Ragland? Chris, you're on mute.
Chris, I think you're still on mute.
You're still on mute. If Chris Ragland wanted to say something, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. There we go. I just wanted to highly recommend the Copper to Gold series. I'm on the 14th week now, and yeah, wonderful. Very good program to start good discussions within our community and outside the community too.
Well, since we're making announcements, I'll say one announcement, which is the unit that's the National Assembly has asked the local assembly of San Rafael to host our unit convention again this year. So a planning team has formed with members from different communities, and that team has booked a hall in Santa Rosa for Saturday, October 1. So you'll be hearing a lot more information about that, but the place is booked and so forth and so on. So Saturday, October. And remember, don't take the privilege of voting for granted. That's them. Okay, any more announcements? So Kira, if you could sing a closing prayer for us, that'd be wonderful.
Yes, I hope that my connection doesn't cut out, but I do want to say a healing prayer. I know that Jamie Brin's wife is kind of ill, so I'm going to be saying that for her. Thy name is my healing, oh my God, and remembrance of thee is my remedy. Nearness to thee is my hope, and love for thee is my companion. Thy mercy to me is my healing, and my succor in both this world and the world to come. Thou verily art the all-bountiful, the all-knowing, the all Bye.